sweater and work-stained trousers that suggested Warsaw-packed 1986 more than European Union 2014. I waved to them, pointed to the bulky Canon 7D hanging from my neck, and then to the building. Old school Google Translate. They waved me inside and gave me a tour. Even for a travel writer, the idea of landing in a small town with no known attractions and no known English speakers, where I had not a single contact and no idea where I'd be sleeping, was nerve-wracking. The fact that I had to write a first-person column about the experience for the New York Times a week later added to the pressure. In 3.5 years as the Frugal traveler, I had never been shy about pointing out my shortcomings. If my weekend in Mezubereni was a miserable failure, the world would know. I had been an unlikely choice for the column to begin with. As a longtime freelancer for the Times, I had written almost entirely about New York City. Of the dozen or so destination stories I had been assigned, most were about the Dominican Republic, Mexico, or Brazil. Countries I knew well, and where I spoke the language. The two exceptions were Philadelphia, where I also spoke the language, and Curacao, where I did a great job of lying on the beach. For a job in which dinner party acquaintances and Twitter followers alike expect you to spout infallible advice about Roman ruins and Tokyo takoyaki off the top of your head, I was pathetically traveled. I had never set foot in East or South Asia. I had spent a total of a week in Europe since my junior semester abroad in Paris, 19 years earlier. Even in the far more familiar Western Hemisphere, I was a renowned bungler. My first column recounted how I almost had to cancel my debut trip after leaving my passport on a men's room paper towel dispenser in the Sao Paulo airport. Someone turned it into Lost and Found, thus saving my trip, and perhaps my career, though plenty wrote in to ask how such a numbskull had gotten the job. According to my editor, I was chosen because he liked writers who traveled, not travel writers. I had spent the previous 2 years covering every corner of Brazil as a freelance correspondent. But introducing yourself as a reporter makes travel far easier, grabbing people's attention and opening many doors. The Frugal Traveler column is different. Under strict orders from my far wiser predecessors, I didn't tell anyone I met on the road that I worked for the Times, or that I was even a writer, until afterward if I needed to use their names. I was expected to make friends and have adventures on the basis of my own extroverted personality. And though I am extroverted, quite so, in fact, among friends or speaking to a crowd or interviewing a source, striking up conversations with strangers for no reason whatsoever always felt to me like that first jump off the dock into a cold New England lake. Even by the Hungary trip, 4 years into the job, approaching strangers still made me nervous. But at least I had raised my game from utterly pathetic to awkwardly mediocre, and had learned that Mezubereni was just the kind of place where jumping into the lake would likely pay off. One of my most ironclad rules of travel is this: the number of visitors a place receives is inversely related to how nice locals are to those visitors. Mezubereni, as far as I knew, had received precisely no foreign tourists ever. It was the anti-Paris, in this distillery, the anti-Louvre. People who inhabit the still plentiful tourist-free swaths of the planet tend not only to be just nicer, but more curious. They say a bear in the wild is just as scared of you as you are of it. I say people in places where outsiders rarely go are just as curious about visitors as visitors are about them. The question is not why the distillery workers invited me, a camera-toting, gibberish-talking stranger, in for a tour. It's why wouldn't they? If it were me, I'd be thinking, what is this odd foreigner doing outside our Sesfusda with a camera? Wait till I tell the kids. And, by the way, isn't it about time we took a break?